So it looks like Luigi Mangione's case has been upgraded to first degree murder and terrorism. There's been a terrorism charge that has been leveled against the defendant here. I mean, this case raises several legal and socio-political questions, no doubt, especially concerning the application of terrorism charges and the implications of the defendant's identity. Because typically in America, terrorism, there's a certain type of defendant who's charged with terrorism for acts that maybe other people in America commit all the time, but they don't get charged with terrorism, you know? So one of the first things that came to my mind when I heard this case and I saw how everyone was reacting to it, in such support for him, which I understand to a certain degree. But then I thought to myself, this is really troubling because if this man's name was Mohammed, Mohammed Al Fayed or something like that, and not Luigi Mangione, I really felt deep in my soul that people would have responded differently to the very exact same set of facts. He followed this man in the lobby in the courtyard of these two hotels. He shot this man in the back. The bullets were marked with denied, deposed, delay. He's 26 years old. He used a fake ID from Hawaii to San Francisco to New York. He used a fake ID. He was found in Pennsylvania with $8,000 of American dollars and 2,000 in foreign currency. All of the things the same. He probably has connections to a rich Saudi family. Let's assume in this hypothetical, but he is Muslim, right? Would people be reacting in the way that they are? And would there have been a crowdfunding for him? And would there be this outpouring of understanding for him on this basis that he did it because of, the corruption in the insurance industry? And I was never sure about that. I was never sure that it would be the same. In fact, I was pretty sure that it wouldn't be the same. I was pretty sure that it would immediately have been a terrorism charge against this young man if his name was Muhammad. I also think that if he were black, like a Sean Diddy Combs, I mean Sean Diddy Combs didn't kill anybody, and we see how this case is viewed by the public. Now you can say there's a philosophical difference. This young man here, Mr. Mangione, he was doing it for society. He wants to get better insurance for people. Everybody has their reasons for doing what they do. But the bottom line is that a man is dead in this case, right? And there's an outpouring of support for this man. I mean, they've raised over 100,000 US dollars for his defense, which he, by the way, rejected, which is interesting, versus this other man who was seen beating up his girlfriend in a hallway. She's fine. She survived it. She's in good health. She went on to have two healthy children, a healthy marriage. She got $30 million in restitution. And the very same people who are calling for Mr. Mangione to be set free and raising his 100,000 American dollars for his defense are calling for this other person, Mr. Combs, to be put in jail for the rest of his life and throw away the key. It's interesting. You have one man dead on one and the other one over here in perfect health. She's living her life. She's living the life. And this is different. So I was never 100% comfortable with it because I believe in, justice for all, the same justice for all. We can't have these different rules. And so on that basis, I was very sort of like, I'm taking a sort of a hands-off approach or, just, waiting to see, what they come up with here. I think that the terrorism charge, I'm surprised that they brought it. I'm not sure that they can win it, but it seems to stem from the prosecution, Alvin Bragg's claim that the killing was meant to intimidate or coerce a civilian population or influence government policies or actions, which is the statutory definition of terrorism in many jurisdictions, including New York. So you have the words deny, depose, and delay that were written on the casings and bullets, which could signal a political or ideological motive, obviously. You also have the premeditated and public nature of the crime, which prosecutors argue was designed to send a message to, to the entire society, if possible, the global society. Now, they went from second-degree murder to first-degree murder, which in New York, first-degree murder charges are limited to specific circumstances such as murder of a law enforcement officer or an act of terrorism. If prosecutors can tie Mangione's action to terrorism, it provides a legal basis for the upgraded charge. But also, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, in a case where you have, or you can show that there was premeditation in the murder, that that would qualify as a first degree murder charge. It was a premeditated murder. Now, how much does Mr. Mangione's identity help or harm him? I mean, if Luigi Mangione were Mohammed Al Fayed, public perception and media framing would shift, I think. I think personally, right? I mean, and you can say that I'm the problem, because you can say that it's not true. It has nothing to do with identity, but I'm gonna beg to differ, right? I think if he were Muhammad Al Fayed and he did exactly the same, he looks exactly the same. This is the same face. Everything is the same, except that he's Mohammed Al Fayed. I think public perception and media framing of this whole case would shift immediately, right? Because there are some biases and stereotypes in the society, and identity does make a difference. A Muslim or Arabic sounding name could trigger implicit bias, and not just in America, by the way, right? And, they're associating the crime more strongly with terrorism due to, a preconceived bias about people in Muslim, with Muslim sounding names or from Muslim sounding ethnic backgrounds. you know, as far as the media, headlines and discussions would amplify the terrorism act angle much more aggressively, influencing public opinion and potentially the jury pool over time. Kind of what they're doing even with the Diddy case, not just on conventional media, but social media as well, where, the jury pool is being influenced every day by how the media is framing this. And some of the most vocal people on the Diddy case are completely silent, or they are very sympathetic to this case. And interestingly also is that both of these cases are being handled by the same law firm, by a husband and wife team, Mark Agnifilo and his wife Karen Friedman Agnifilo, right? Um, so as far as the legal strategy that these people are using, I mean, they might argue that the defendant faces unfair prejudice because of perceived associations, with broader geopolitical affairs. I mean, they're going to say, well, look, I mean, this has nothing to do with terrorism. He's not Muslim. And this was really just somebody who, I frankly think they're going to go for the insanity defense here. With Mangione's non-Muslim and non-Arabic sounding name, I think it's a good thing for him in this case. That the terrorism charge will not resonate very strongly with the public, in my opinion, especially not the public that has already indicated that they're very much sympathetic to Mr. Mangione, right? So yeah, in that sense, I feel like the terrorism the terrorism charge, you know, it's not a slam dunk for the prosecution. I mean, the alleged premeditation, the symbolic actions, the messages on the casings, these all obviously suggest an intent beyond, say, personal animosity. And the prosecutors may argue that the killing was targeted, and it's a targeted killing of a high-profile CEO to incite fear or provoke societal or institutional change, which would satisfy the coercion element of terrorism, because it seems like he really wanted to incite the public in some way, whether on his side or not, about this insurance guy whom he didn't know, he had never met. The problem is that the connection between these alleged acts and broader terrorism motives might be not so strong, right? Without clearer evidence of Mr. Mangione's ideological goals or affiliations. I mean, does he have any ideological affiliations that are traditionally tied to terroristic acts? I mean, terrorism is almost, reserved for people from Muslim countries, rightly or wrongly. This is not, I don't make the rules. It's just my observation. This is just my observation. It just seems to me that it's reserved for them. You have very similar things happen in society and nobody calls it terrorism, which is always very baffling to me. Um, and so the prosecution might struggle to prove that this was terrorism and that Mangione acted to influence, say, a broader audience rather than as part of a personal vendetta or isolated criminal act by a man with mental problems. They're talking about schizophrenia and so on. We know that his defense attorney she has a very good reputation, and she's likely to argue that there's a lack of clear evidence tying Mr. Mangione's actions to a political, religious, or ideological motive, right? And she will highlight the absence of, an organizational tie, even though there was a manifesto, correct me if I'm wrong, which would probably suffice for this organizational tie. And she would frame the writings on the casings as ambiguous, as unrelated to anything, or purely personal grievances rather than evidence of terrorism. And she might also say that the casings, the writings on the casings, and the weapon itself, which was some kind of 3D weapon or whatever that even means, and the fake ID, um, were part of some kind of questionable search and seizure. I don't think she's going to win that, but she could try that. And for sure, she's going to say that Mangione was mentally ill. I mean, because I think her law firm specialized. And to be honest, I think that if you're going to do something like that, there's some kind of mental illness in there somewhere. Something's not. I mean, you don't under normal circumstances do something like that. So something is definitely off. Maybe he was taking some kind of medication that he had an allergic response to, or some kind of breakdown happened there. And or we don't have the facts. I mean, it could be that it was an act of personal retribution. It could be that they knew each other, him and this man might have known each other online or something like that. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm sure the defense will try, every trick in the book. They could even try to just negotiate down the charges to argue for the terrorism related counts to be dismissed out of the starting block, right? And to reduce the case back down to second degree murder with, a possession of the 3D shotgun charge, and then try to get this resolved with the mental illness prong. Um, I think obviously public opinion will play a very huge role in this case. And yeah, I think that, you know, the terrorism charge, I think it's a tough one because he's not Muslim, right? I mean, I hate to say it. That's not my rule. If you're Muslim, don't attack me. I'm just saying that's my observation. That's how it is in society, rightly or wrongly, right? That's my observation. If you're Muslim, chances are, if you do something like this, they're going to call it terrorism, and if you're not Muslim, they're going to call it something else. It's just that simple. Um, so the terrorism charge is definitely ambitious, and it will be challenged really, really aggressively in court by the Agnifilo lawyer, and unless, of course, the prosecution can substantiate that his actions were ideologically driven, which I don't think they'll be able to. Um, Public perception again is very much on the side of Mangione, and he's lucky that his name is Mangione and not Al Fayed or something like that, right? Because this would have shifted things. So his defense will definitely probably focus on deconstructing the terrorism narrative and emphasizing the weakness in the prosecution's case, right? While also seeking to humanize the defendant and to counter this potential prejudice and to, paint a picture of a young man who was a very good student, came from a very upstanding family, but he had some mental issues and he lost it. And I hope, you know what? I hope for his sake and for everyone's sake that this is what this is, that he really genuinely had a mental lapse. This is not somebody who, once he gets out, let's say you get him out on a mental illness charge, I mean a mental illness a defense, and you putting back into the society. Is this something that's going to happen again? Or will he be cured of whatever it is that caused him to do this in the first place? I hope the latter, for everybody's sake, right? But yeah, it's very interesting that the prosecution has upgraded the charges to first degree murder with a charge of a count of terrorism against a sort of non-Muslim defendant. And we have to see how this all works out. But anyway, that's all for this one, you guys. Just to remind you again that I'd love if you would subscribe and hit the thumbs up and leave a comment.